The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and others, are very openly looking for a way to challenge the US dollar's dominance as the world reserve currency. For the first time in decades, the conditions to make this possible look like they may be lining up. Geopolitical tensions are rapidly rising, trade relationships with the United States are fracturing, sanctions have been weaponized, and overall trust in the global financial order is completely eroding. To many, this looks like the perfect time to make a move. And over the weekend, China has made its intentions very clear. China's leader has publicly urged that the Chinese yuan evolve into a widely used international currency, one that could eventually be held as a global reserve asset. This is something that he has said in the past, but they brought it up right now. And this raises a much bigger question. Can China's currency actually become the world's reserve currency? Would China even want that responsibility? And what would this mean for you and your money? Right now, the US dollar is declining on the global stage. Even after the recent market volatility for gold and silver, they've still been very steadily rising over the past few years. And this is a signal that investors and countries might be losing confidence in the US dollar system. And this is exactly why China's push to become the global reserve currency actually matters. And this is why the US is on high alert. President Trump has been very vocal about this issue over the years. He's criticized China for devaluing yuan. Trump is making it very clear right now that he doesn't mind a weaker dollar.
With the current value of the dollar, do you think it's declined too much?
No, I think it's great. I mean, the value of the dollar. Look at the business we're doing. No, dollar's doing great.
And he just appointed a Fed chair who would also be helping to get an even lower dollar by helping to lower interest rates.
If the meeting is next week, I'd be voting for a rate cut.
And Trump has also threatened 100% tariffs, warning these BRICS nations against de-dollarization. What's important to understand about how all of this works is that right now, the US benefits from something that economists call exorbitant privilege. Because the dollar is the world's reserve currency, the United States can consume more than it produces and pay for the difference with its own money. Here's how that works. The world needs US dollars because dollars are used for global trade. When it comes to getting oil, commodities, and paying for shipping, a lot of this is done in US dollars. So you have a lot of countries that have foreign exchange reserves that are held in dollars. Even when the United States isn't involved in a transaction, the dollar usually is. And that creates permanent global demand for US assets. To safely hold dollars, the world will buy US treasuries. They'll buy dollar denominated financial assets of any kind. And this does two things. First, it keeps US interest rates lower than they otherwise would be. A higher general demand for US debt means that the US doesn't have to pay as high of an interest rate on that debt to attract buyers of that debt. They need the treasuries anyway, so they don't care as much about how much they pay in the rate. Now, we've seen that over the past few years that these long-term interest rates on US bonds is actually going up, signaling that the demand for long-term bonds might be declining on a global stage. Second, the world's need for US dollars also allows the US to issue massive amounts of debt without triggering a funding crisis. They can always raise the money that they need. The United States is able to run large trade deficits, meaning that it actually buys more from other countries than it sells, and it can run a large fiscal deficit, meaning that it spends more money than it actually makes. And normally that would weaken a currency, spike inflation, and cause other issues. Instead, exporting nations, meaning nations that sell more than they buy, they're selling and they're taking in dollars when they're selling, and they're taking those dollars and they're recycling those dollars back into US treasuries. And because of that, the dollar stays strong and US borrowing can stay cheap. And this is the privilege that a country like China does not have. No one is needing Chinese yuan to settle in global trade. So China plays a different game and they operate on the opposite side of the system where they produce more than they consume and they run persistent trade surpluses, meaning that they sell more than they buy. China controls the value and the flow of their currency to keep their entire system stable. They enjoy this kind of control. It prevents their economy from having wild swings that lead to job losses and other issues that could cause civil unrest. And this is part of why China manages and at times will weaken the yuan. If the yuan gets too strong against the US dollar, then their exports will go down. And once again, they want to maintain control over their economy. And so keeping the yuan weaker means they can continue to export and keep jobs and businesses and growth at the pace that they want. So the question here is, does China actually want to be the world's reserve currency? Because a reserve currency has to have a few different things. It needs to have deep and open capital markets. It needs to have rule of law that's trusted globally, political stability, free movement of capital, and it needs to have a massive supply of safe assets. The thing is that a country that issues the global reserve currency loses control. It has to tolerate the fact that capital can flow in and out freely, volatility in financial markets, asset bubbles and crashes, and foreigners having influence over their domestic markets. The US has accepted that trade off decades ago, but does China actually want that? China talks about de dollarization, it builds alternatives, it accumulates gold, it settles trade outside the US dollar when it can. But is it really ready to become the world's reserve currency? That means that they would have to lose the one thing that they've always held on tightly to, which is control over their monetary and economic system. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice. Please don't take financial advice from a random guy on the internet who used to go outside talking to a stick. But if China's currency were to become the world reserve's currency, then we would have to imagine that that would probably have something to do with precious metals. And the massive rise and even more rapid retracement that we've seen in the precious metals markets recently might be an opportunity to prepare for that kind of a world that is coming. But I don't know. Maybe I am completely losing the plot. What did I miss? What did I get wrong? Or how could I be looking at this differently? Let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't already, you've got to subscribe to my live show that I do with Ben Levitt. It's called Memes and Markets. We go live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. You can find that at the link in the description down below. If you're enjoying this content and you want access to deeper insights, you can join my Patreon for my weekly macroeconomic newsletter, or I just launched channel memberships. Macro analyst tier members get exclusive access to videos that I'm posting purely to answer questions and address the things that I'm doing. You can find that at the link in the description down below. I'm Keith D, here to talk everything money and markets. And until next time, peace.